This program was made possible by a grant from S.R. Foxley and Q, and by the generous support of viewers like you. If you wish to join them in pledging to this channel, please find a link to the Prophet of Zod Patreon below. God's Not Dead may be the biggest steaming pile of shit ever to make it onto the big screen. Sure, from a purely cinematic standpoint, it's probably not as objectively bad as, say, Plan 9 from Outer Space or God's Not Dead 2, but the sheer audacious spitefulness of this movie and the poisonous effect it's had on the Christian community have made it a poster child for ugly religious propaganda. And for good reason. Of course, the most overtly horrifying thing about it is its hateful portrayal of atheists. Drawing on cartoonish stereotypes ranging from the cripplingly egotistical Professor Radisson, who implausibly forces all his students to declare God is dead, to the psychopathic Mark Shelley, who taunts his aging mother and of course breaks up with his girlfriend as soon as she gets cancer, this movie is unapologetic, even in your face, about portraying atheists as openly mean, self-serving villains who have no moral compass or even basic human decency. However, while this is the most obviously offensive aspect of the movie, and the one it clubs you over the head with most aggressively, I would suggest that it has a deeper underlying message that, while a bit more subtle, entrenched itself more deeply into the minds of Christians and did more to sabotage their interactions with non-believers. So join me as we explore how God's Not Dead sanitizes Christianity. To understand what's worst about God's Not Dead, I'd suggest looking back over the movie and asking yourself a really simple question. And that is, what do the Christians in this movie stand for? Seriously, think about it. Does this movie ever even hint at Christians taking a stand on gay marriage, teacher-led school prayer, abortion, the role of women in the Christian home? Do they make any demands or even suggestions about how other people should behave or push for laws enforcing Christian morality? No, not even once. Now, of course, you might say that that's not what this movie's about, and that it would be unfair to expect Christians to unpack their doctrine or their political positions in every movie they ever make. But if you want a sense of just how obviously this movie avoids these positions, and if you have the time and endurance, then go back and watch God's Not Dead from start to finish, taking note of everything the movie reveals about Christianity. I can guarantee you'll learn practically nothing about the substance of the religion or what it stands for. I don't think this is a mistake. In fact, I think the writers of this film went out of their way to thoroughly sanitize Christianity, stripping it clean of everything that's aggressive or controversial about it, until all that's left are a few vague, warm and fuzzy impressions of the religion and its followers. In this video, we'll explore what these impressions are and eventually discuss the reasons for and ramifications of this representation of Christianity. Number 1. Christians are like lambs being led to the slaughter. The very first scene of this movie gets right down to business, doing a ton to set the stage in a very short period of time.
Name? Wheaton. Josh Wheaton. You got your pre-registration sheet? Yeah. All core requirements are here. What is your humanities elective?
Philosophy 150, Radisson 11, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
You might want to think about a different instructor.
Gus?
Let's just say you're wandering into the snake pit. I recommend Patel, or maybe Mueller.
Come on, man, it can't be that bad.
Think Roman Colosseum, lions, people cheering for your death.
First, let's get the obvious out of the way. This scene sets up the all-too-familiar trope that's the subject of every Christian parent's fear and the paint-by-numbers premise of every stupid chain email from the 90s. That of the naive Christian kid headed to college for the first time, where he'll be subjected to aggressive indoctrination and probably mistreatment at the hands of the dreaded atheist professor. But there are a couple of other things going on here that set up a few of the movie's deeper thematic currents. First is the remark about colosseums and lions. This is presented as a playful bit of off-the-cuff exaggeration, but it very effectively taps into deep-seated imagery that evangelicals instantly recognize and know how to feel about. That of Christians meekly but bravely facing death as they're publicly fed to lions in ancient Rome. This is drilled into their heads, often since childhood bizarrely, to instill in them the sense that everybody's out to get them. It establishes their coveted position as victims, insinuating that the world is full of institutions and people that hate them and misunderstand them. But what's equally important and more relevant to this specific movie, is the Christian side of the equation. The Christians in this narrative are never targeted for terrorizing anybody or engaging in any subversive behavior. They're just innocently minding their business, trying to practice their religion in private, when the world barges in and starts attacking them out of sheer pointless spite. And of course the Christians, having never held any fault in the whole thing to begin with, face death with passive, humble dignity. It's hard to overemphasize how much these ideas feed into Christians' view of themselves in the world. The familiar story of a Christian heading off to college is both an example of and a symbol for this broader persecution narrative. There's one more really bizarre detail in this exchange that tells us a ton about how Christians feel about themselves and their place in the world. Remember how the student worker notices the cross hanging from Josh's neck and immediately thinks to warn him away from Radisson's class? Just take a moment to consider how weird this is. Why does this guy have this reaction to seeing a cross necklace? This guy lives in f***ing America. If anything, he should have thought, a cross. Maybe this guy is a devout Christian like hundreds of other people I'll see today. Or maybe he's just casually identifying with Christianity like thousands of people I'll see today. Or maybe it's just a necklace. Or more likely he would have thought nothing at all, because seeing an American college student wearing a cross is about as normal as seeing one wearing pants. Yet he reacts as if this cross is some weird cultural aberration, as if it immediately makes him see Josh as something different than everybody else. This exchange is absolute nonsense, yet it very quickly and effectively prompts Christians to feel that they're a small besieged group surrounded by people who are so non-Christian that they would never wear a cross and think you're weird when you do wear one. The devil's in the details when it comes to propaganda, and this is a devilish detail indeed. Number 2. Christians are harmless victims of others' aggression. Soon after Josh registers for college, this movie shows us the ambush interview in which New Left reporter Amy literally leaps out from behind a wall to harass Willie Robinson on his way to church. This very quickly establishes a theme we'll see throughout this movie, that while Christians just want to mind their own business, other people keep coming at them looking for a fight. First of all, look at the bizarre bumper stickers on Amy's car. Meat is murder. American humanist. I love evolution? What the hell? I mean, who the f*** owns an I love evolution sticker? I guess maybe some people, who knows? But it's obvious that this is less a collection of stickers an actual liberal would have on her car than a collection of things that trigger Christians. Seriously, it looks like a sheltered Christian school student designed this car based on what they think people in the world are like. This weird assortment of stickers is just a ham-fisted signal that this woman is a general enemy of, and danger to, Christians. As if the name The New Left didn't do enough to establish that. And by the way, do Christians ever cover their cars with aggressively opinionated bumper stickers? Because for some reason we never see that in this movie. Again, God's Not Dead doesn't want to show us Christians with actual opinions. Also, look at where this encounter takes place. Amy ambushes Willie at the door of his church. The filmmakers are deliberately establishing that she's stepping into his territory by interrupting him on his way to his private place of worship. Viewers may not consciously notice this, but they do deep down, and all these details are calculated to insinuate that the liberal atheists are aggressive while the Christians are just trying to do their thing. But what I think is most interesting about this scene is the bizarre lengths it goes to establish Willie Robinson as harmless, folksy, and benign, and to avoid ever acknowledging any political or social stand made by Christians. First, look at his reaction when she asks about people being offended that he prays on his show.
So what do you say to people who are offended by your show, not just because of the hunting, but because you openly pray to Jesus in every episode?
Hey, we're not trying to offend anybody, all right? If they don't want to watch the show, they can turn the channel.
Basically, she comes out swinging, and he throws his hands up and says he isn't looking for a fight. And of course, the changing the channel thing makes it clear he's not trying to push things on others. Also, look at the tortured dialogue meant to make really good and sure we know he's not sexist, and that his wife, while they put on a unified front, isn't being pushed into a homemaker's role and can comfortably say no to her husband if she wishes.
I haven't been barefoot and pregnant in a really long time. I do kind of miss those days, huh?
Yeah. You want to start again? We can try.
No.
And you go along with everything he says?
We've been married for 20 years. I don't go along with everything he says, but on the things that matter, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Hell, it even makes sure to clarify that she likes to dress up in heels and it's not for him.
Well, why do you wear those heels?
What's wrong with them?
You're too tall. You're taller than me.
You're big enough to handle it.
I'm just saying, I don't want to be the short guy at the prom.
Mr. Robertson!
This may sound nitpicky, but seriously, Go back and watch the whole scene. The amount of dialogue crammed in to distance Willie, Christians, and this movie from the idea of marital submissiveness is just bizarre. The movie just has to sanitize itself from even a hint of restrictive Christian teaching. And the few times it even addresses such teachings, it immediately has a liberal present it in the most exaggerated and accusatory way, then lets the Christians lightheartedly disavow it.
I'm actually surprised to see you here. I thought you'd be home, barefoot and pregnant.
I haven't been barefoot and pregnant in a really long time.
And think of how petty Amy sounds when she gets on the guy's case just for praying. Is that really what people are most upset with the Robertsons for? Willie and his family have said some super ugly things and taken some aggressive stance on homosexuals and even people of other races. Yet she gets on him for prayer. Now sure, this movie was made before the Robinsons had finished their descent into utter madness, so maybe the movie wasn't aware of these things. But it's not an accident that God's Not Dead shows her attacking them for a personal ritual, not for their public and more aggressive political stands. Of course, Willie is folksy as absolute hell, bringing up the y'all thing, which is also meant to drive home that Amy is stereotyping him and his tribe, and by association the movie's Christian audience, with her accusations.
I guess when you say you're referring to the whole group of my family, which would be y'all. You can just change it to y'all, that'd be an easier expression. That way it'll get everybody in there.
All meant to put Christians on defensive against her. And did anybody notice what he said when she talked about him getting rich?
So, y'all have made a fortune, isn't that right?
We're doing all right. We can certainly buy bigger tires on our trucks and four-wheelers to get out in the mud with, so life is good.
What a deliberately euphemistic way of understating the fact that you're rich as f***. Number 3. Even other Christians are against us. This next point is relatively quick because it's given a short and straightforward treatment in the movie, but it's definitely worth bringing up. God's Not Dead wants us to understand that Josh is under pressure not only from the world, but from other Christians. And in fact, this point is important enough that the movie gives Josh a horrible shrew of a girlfriend just to establish it. Josh's girlfriend, as everybody knows, pushes him to give up on his fight with Professor Radisson, even telling him,
"Return the book to the library, sign the stupid paper, and move on."
This is a Christian telling her Christian boyfriend to publicly state that God is dead. Even Josh's parents, and her mother it seems, are against him on this. The message is clear. If you're a true Christian, you're under attack not only from non-believers, but from lukewarm or compromising Christians. The level of paranoia this brings into the movie is utterly insane, but many evangelicals do have a sense that something like this is the case. That most liberal denominations, certainly the Catholics, and even some in their own pews are pseudo-Christians who aren't really right with God and wouldn't stand up for him. Of course, this little angle is vital for this movie to mention for one simple reason. We live in America, where most people and practically all politicians acknowledge Christianity. So this is where you need to go if you want to indulge the weird belief that your dominant religion is under siege. Number 4. Christians just want the right to choose, and let others choose. Near the climax of his confrontation with Professor Radisson, Josh makes a key statement that basically sums up this movie's message about the interaction between Christians and non-believers. And that is,
What I want is for them to make their own choice. That's what God wants.
yep, you heard it. Christians aren't going to push you into being a Christian. There's no pressure, and they're not going to interfere in how you live your life. They've made their choice, and they just want you to have freedom to do the same. This, of course, is the most brazenly backward thing said in this entire movie. Seriously, if any fundamentalist Christians are watching, how many of you are cool with the idea of your kids making their own choice about religion? How many of them would let things slide if one of them said they were an atheist? Or were gay? If the answer isn't none, it's god close to it. Yet it seems that this is how the movie wants to pretend Christians act. Even any Christian with the slightest sense of self-awareness should know this is not the case. Yet they kind of want to think it's the case, and this movie is here to help them do so. But look, as a public atheist activist, I get a lot of messages from people under pressure in the conflict between Christians and non-believers or even doubters. And literally all of these messages, the atheists are on the defensive, asking how to deal with people pressuring them to be a Christian or otherwise harassing them for their lack of belief. Now sure, this isn't all Christians, but this phenomena does exist, and to pretend this isn't what atheists are mostly reacting to totally mischaracterizes the situation. You know what I never get? Messages from atheists asking me how to make their kids, or anybody else, be atheist. Maybe some atheists do this, but it's extremely rare if it happens. And even if it does, let's get back to the idea that Christians are generally not okay with other people being atheists, and in fact are off the charts neurotic about kids leaving the faith. Yet God's Not Dead has to scrub Christianity clean of even this trait. Not a single person in this movie aggressively pushes Christianity. Anybody who finds Jesus does so freely of their own will because they're searching. And in fact, this movie devotes entire characters and storylines to showing this, and to projecting Christian demands for conformity onto everybody other than Christians. Let's look at a couple, shall we? First is Aisha, who lives beneath the oppressive expectations of her conservative Muslim father, who even makes her wear the dreaded hijab. Now, of course, this is a problem. I don't mean to downplay that, and Islam is absolutely f***ing horrible. But come on, are we going to ignore the huge amount of pressure Christians put on their kids to follow their religion, conform to their cultural expectations, and yes, adopt their dress codes? Yet this movie just dumps all these traits on Muslims, while pretending Christians are just amorphous friendly do-gooders who just want to let people choose. Notice this movie never shows Aisha happily practicing Islam when Christians come up and preach at her. By all appearances, she just wanders over to it on her own, because of course who wouldn't given the choice, since it's better than and nicer than her religion? And this Christianity is represented as nothing but vague warm and fuzzy stuff from Franklin Graham about God setting you free. For some reason, she didn't take off her hijab just to listen to verses from Paul about women submitting to men and keeping their mouths shut in church. Also, look at how they set up the scene of her practicing her faith. She's just exercising her personal right to explore what she believes in the most private place you can imagine, a person's bedroom, when someone else storms in and interferes. I mean, isn't it just a tiny bit ironic that this movie shows other people bursting in and telling Christians what they can and can't do in their bedroom? You can't make projection more on the nose than this. But this scene really summarizes God's Not Dead in a nutshell. Christians are just trying to be themselves in peace, yet other people jump in and interfere just because they're mean or spiteful or closed-minded. And of course, after she's struck by her father and kicked out of the house, because again, Muslims are the ones who act this way toward their kids, but Christians never do, we see her comforted by pastors. Interesting, huh? Muslim dads take away your choice. Atheist professors take away your choice. But Christians never do this. They're just there to help you pick up the pieces after other people proselytize and abuse you for not following their beliefs. Apparently, this movie doesn't wish to address the infinitely more numerous times that atheists like me are approached by kids who have been harassed by Christian parents. Then we have Martin, whose dad is apparently a communist or atheist of some kind, and is thus totally against his son trying to practice Christianity. His parental interaction is handled much more quickly than Aisha's, but of course the movie has to show an atheist parent putting on the same pressure Muslim parents do. Naturally, Martin just discovers and approaches Christianity with wide-eyed curiosity, under no pressure at all, and Josh is there to help in the face of a demanding atheist professor, leading to this absolute gem of a quote.
See, to me, he's not dead. He's alive. I don't want anyone to get talked out of believing in him just because some professor thinks they should.
This is a really weird thing to say, but I know some Christians think this way because I've dealt with this nonsense in my personal life. My kids know that they're absolutely free to explore religion at my house, while they face overt and aggressive pressure from elsewhere to practice Christianity, complete with threats of hell and everything. Yet I end up being told that I'm not giving them the chance to be Christian just because I have open conversations about belief and disbelief with them. Funny the exclusive place that Christians demand in the conversation, and how little they feel others must do before we are taking away other people's choice. Number 5. Christians are passive and meek, until they need to stand up for themselves. This last point ties into and even reiterates other points I've identified, but I think it deserves to be explicitly pointed out, as it mischaracterizes Christian assertiveness, and in the end ties into the main reason that God's Not Dead portrays Christians the way it does. If you keep from being distracted by this movie's horrible atheist caricatures long enough to pay attention to the Christians, you'll notice that none of them ever aggressively come at anybody else. Reverends Dave and Jude are just friendly do-gooders who, when they're not set up as charming comic relief, offer support, engage other people in lighthearted ways, and compassionately rush in to save a lost soul as an act of mercy. Willie Robertson answers out-of-the-blue accusations with patient, folksy charm, then shows up on screen at the end as a sort of benevolent big brother offering encouragement for Josh. Aisha and Martin just passively explore Christianity on their own until others come in and harass them about it, while Mina's only role, aside from asking her asshole atheist brother to be helpful with her mom, seems to be sheepishly taking abuse off her asshole atheist boyfriend. Amy is only Christian long enough to turn to it for comfort after getting cancer, and the newsboy's role is just to provide that comfort, along with a prayer of salvation and some music.
God's not dead, he's surely alive.
But what about Josh, you might ask? Didn't he get pretty aggressive with Professor Radisson at some points? Yes, but we can't even begin to understand Josh's outburst without taking into account how far he was pushed by Radisson. And this is one of the movie's core deceptions. Just watch the progression of their conflict. Out of the blue on the first day of class, Radisson struts in like a totally arrogant asshole and demands that the class write something that violates Josh's faith. And even then, watch Josh's tone of voice, even his body language, as he responds to this absurd demand. He's humble, courteous, almost pathetic looking as he initially pleads with Radisson. His resistance is quiet, almost passive, until he's pushed to the point that he has to finally say something. He's not in anybody else's business. He's not trying to push his beliefs on others. Nor does he disrupt class every time Radisson mentions the name of a secular philosopher. He only speaks up because Radisson comes to him looking to bully him and interfere with his right to privately practice his own faith. Or he's standing up to give this right to others, and this is the case with every Christian we see in this movie. God's Not Dead never shows angry street preachers shouting to students about how they're vile sinners who will burn in hell. You'll never see God hates fag signs, campus crusaders proselytizing in the dorms, or protesters harassing a young woman who's trying to get an abortion. It never shows Christian students endlessly disrupting class to argue with their professors over things like evolution, anthropology, comparative religions, or any other part of the class that they personally disagree with. Sure, it pays lip service to this last scenario, but only to present its own warped version of it by depicting Josh pushed into a corner by a bullying professor before finally having to speak up. Now, do I deny that professors are ever aggressively liberal or anti-religious? Of course not. But this movie over-exaggerates this factor to cartoonish extent while pretending Christians are never aggressive themselves. And I would say that this is the crux of what's really wrong with this movie. As ugly as its portrayal of atheists is, I'd suggest that its vanilla portrayal of Christianity as nothing but a meek, besieged little religion does even more to mischaracterize the situation. It asks by insinuation that if Christians are just sitting there minding their own business trying to practice their faith in peace, then why do atheists have to burst in and start bothering them? When Christians view themselves the way this movie encourages them to view themselves, then they're going to think that every objection to them is persecution. If Christians do no harm, then atheism, or at least atheist activism, comes off as mean, disruptive, and unnecessary. But this isn't the case. Christians aren't just trying to do their own thing. Whether or not you agree with them on abortion, gay rights, school prayer, or any of the other major issues they take stands on, you have to admit they are taking these stands, often in a public and aggressive way, and often using legislation to curtail the behavior of others. They do go on the offensive. They bring their rules and expectations into other people's worlds and demand that others change their behavior to conform. And when atheists like me stand up for them, we're the ones on the defensive, either for ourselves or others. In many, I'd say most cases, we're the kindly Josh Wheaton of the situation. But the movie tries to claim that role exclusively for Christians. By pretending there is no Christian aggression, it implies we atheists have no reason to stick up for the victims of that aggression, which delegitimizes our activism and makes us look like useless bullies. I previously acknowledged that Christians can't be expected to unpack their doctrine and their politics in every movie they ever make. But those things do belong in this movie, because showing other people being aggressive to you while meticulously avoiding any mention of your own aggressive behavior is just plain dishonest. At best, Christianity and atheism are both throwing punches at each other. More often, Christianity is walking around the playground shoving LGBT students, secular students, students of other religions, or people who just don't want to recite their prayers when atheists jump in to stop them. But then as soon as a teacher walks around the corner, Christianity throws its hands behind its back and pretends it was just getting beaten up. That's essentially what this movie does. It presents a sanitized version of Christianity, washed clean of everything it stands for and everything it demands of other people. By doing so, it discourages Christians from thinking about who they are and how they interact with others, and to instead just pretend that everybody's out to get them. And that might just be the worst thing about God's Not Dead.